What makes a great pitching performance? Is it the number of strikeouts? Is it a perfect 27 up, 27 down? Is it a shutout in a pivotal game? Or is there more to it? There have been 24 perfect games in the history of MLB, 323 no-hitters, and countless shutouts. Now, every perfect game is special, no doubt, but there have been times, even when a hit is given up, the pitcher's performance was spectacular. It would be easy to make a video listing perfect games, so let's start with an amazing performance that wasn't even a no-hitter. Kerry Wood was only 20 years old when he pitched this absolute masterpiece in 1998 against the Astros. Coming into May, Wood was 2-2 in his debut season in the majors with a 5.89 ERA, so it's safe to say the folks in Chicago on May 6th had no idea what they were in store for. Kerry Wood put on an absolute clinic that put himself in MLB record books when he struck out 20 batters, reaching the 20K milestone set by veteran Roger Clemens. Now, think about that. In his 5th big league start, not even old enough to drink, Kerry Wood threw one of the most dominating performances ever by a pitcher that is still talked about to this day. And while not a flawless performance, it does stand out as the highest game score ever at 105. The 20K milestone is no joke either. For the longest time, it was Roger Clemens and Kerry Wood, but since Wood's memorable game, 2 other people have reached the 20K mark, Max Scherzer and Randy Johnson. The latter of which became the oldest player to throw a perfect game when he did so at 40 against the Braves. The fact that the big unit spent 2 decades throwing smoke and somehow his arm didn't fall off is a feat in and of itself. But to be 40 years old, consistently hitting mid to upper 90s, and going a complete game is damn near unheard of. Age alone isn't what makes this game so special. Of the 117 pitches Randy threw that day, 87 were strikes. He only missed the strike zone 30 times. To break that down even further, nearly 3 out of every 4 pitches were strikes. This is absolutely mind-blowing. For reference, the average MLB strike-to-ball ratio is 62%, and the big unit was just a hair shy of 75%. Randy was almost perfect in a perfect game. There was a moment of defeat when Mike Hampton added a little drama by almost getting on in the 6th, but thanks to an all-time play by Alex Centrone, the big unit was able to achieve his second and last no-hitter, which seems weird to say. As terrifying as Randy was, he only had 2 no-hitters in his career, while Max Scherzer had 2 in a season. Scherzer did a lot in 2015. He had 2 no-hitters, one in June and the other in October. But what may be even more impressive was Max becoming the first player ever to achieve a game score of 100 plus twice in the same season. The first of which actually came 6 days before his first no-hitter that year. On June 14th, Scherzer tossed the second complete game of his career with 16 Ks and only giving up 1 hit to the Brewers, leading to a 100 game score for just the 12th time in MLB. A few short months later, on October 3rd versus the Mets, Max Scherzer would throw a no-hitter, resulting in a game score of 104, second only to Kerry Wood. This marked the second no-no of Max's career, the first of which came earlier in that same season. What's truly amazing about Scherzer's performance is that he didn't walk a single batter in either of his no-hitters. He ended up with 17 strikeouts on the Mets, with 9 of those being in a row at one point. Max cemented his name in the record books as he became the first pitcher to throw a no-no with at least 17 Ks and no walks. Not to mention tying for the most strikeouts in a no-hitter with the legend himself, Nolan Ryan, who had many incredible performances himself. I do have to mention that Nolan Ryan had an untouchable 7 no-hitters in his 27-season career. 7 guys. Sandy Koufax has 4 and a handful of other guys have 3, but none come close to Nolan's 7. That's a stat that honestly may never be touched again. And how do we pick just one that stands out? Is it his first no-hitter that happened over 50 years ago in 1973? I'm going to say it's his last in 1991. What makes this so special is that Nolan Ryan was 44 years old, an age most pitchers don't even make it to, let alone throwing a complete 9 innings. But somehow, someway, Nolan Ryan's arm was still in good enough shape to strike out 16 Blue Jays on his way to his final no-hitter. And this wasn't some ragtag Toronto team. The Blue Jays were the best hitting team in MLB in 1991. What's even crazier is that Ryan told staff before the game that his back was hurting and he'd be surprised if he made it out of the first inning. So old, beat up, and losing his hair, the Ryan Express proved something to the world and himself when he struck out Hall of Famer Roberto Alomar for his final out.
That's it! Number 7 is in the books!
Now, this next one is a perfect game, but it wasn't the pitcher's performance that made it stand out. Don't get me wrong, Mark Buehrle's performance in 2009 was absolutely incredible. It had been 5 years since the previous perfect game, but something about Chicago that night made this perfect game one to remember. Mark only struck out 6 of the 27 batters he faced that night. When I was a kid, I had a pitching coach tell me, just throw the ball and let your fielders get the outs. And that's what Buehrle did. The White Sox defense was on point that night, and none more spectacular than Dwayne Wise.
Wise back, makes the catch! What a play! Dwayne Wise makes the catch!
And you hear that voice? That was another reason this was a special night. Hawk Harrelson, being the voice of every White Sox fan, left nothing to the imagination. He poured every ounce of White Sox fandom into every single call that night, leaving us with iconic lines like,
"Call your sons, call your daughters, call your friends, call your neighbors. Mark Buehrle has a perfect game going to the 9th.
But none more legendary than one simple word.
Yes! 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 Yes!
And man, those Chicago crowds are just something else. 28,000 people echoing Hawks sentiments. It just doesn't get any better. Unless you're in the World Series. Obviously, there isn't a more clutch performance from a pitcher than when everything is on the line. And there have been many times pitchers have shown up when it was needed most. Babe Ruth in 1916, pitching 14 innings in Game 2 of the series. Bob Gibson in 68 with 17 strikeouts. Bumgarner in Game 7 of the 2014 World Series when it was for all the marbles. But when it comes to absolutely spectacular pitching performances in the World Series, we have to go back to 1956 when Don Larsen threw the only perfect game in World Series history. Now, let me set the scene. It's 1956, the New York Yankees are taking on the Brooklyn Dodgers in Game 5 at Yankee Stadium, with the series being tied 2-2. Don Larsen, who was having a decent season but nothing to write home about, stepped on the mound for what would become his greatest performance. Larsen only struck out 7 of the 27 he faced, so the defense was hard at work. But just wait until you hear some of these names on these close calls. The second inning was the closest any Dodger came to getting on base when none other than Jackie Robinson hit a liner off Andy Carey before Gil McDougald made the throw to barely beat Jackie to first. In the 5th, Gil Hodges smacked the ball deep to left center, and who was there to make the backhanded grab? Mickey freaking Mantle. It's just one of those games that in 2024 almost seems like a fairy tale. We have all these legends playing on teams with a rivalry that can only be described as legendary, in one of the most legendary stadiums, ending in a legendary way, a perfect game, and leaving us with one of the most iconic pictures in baseball history. Now, I know we just barely scratched the surface when it comes to pitching performances. Every perfect game and every no-hitter are worth mentioning to some degree. But there are some that just stand out, whether it's the crowd, the age of the player, or something else. Who do you think has had the most spectacular pitching performance? Was he on this list? If not, who did I miss? Let me know in the comments, dive into the downfall of Jackson Holliday, and subscribe to Baseball Buzz.